Glad to have you back on the morning show here on the Raj News. I am Adesua Omorwan.
I'm Rufai Hussaini. Great to see you again, Adesua.
Great to see you too. Now, society is inundated with people living with different challenges, and going through amputation is a very dire one. UNICEF estimates that 140 million children are living with disabilities in developing countries, a considerable portion of which are child amputees. Sadly, these children face discrimination, isolation, and stigmatization in the society. Well, joining us now to discuss the challenges of the Nigerian child amputee and how society can be more receptive of them is the Executive Director, Irede Foundation, Crystal Chigbu, who is a mother and whose daughter was amputated before the age of 1. Welcome to the Morning Show.
Hi, Adesua.
Great to have you.
All right, great to have you once again, and I'm really excited you're here. Can you just walk us through the story of your daughter, Beulah?
So when I gave birth to Beulah had what was called congenital tibia hemimelemia, and basically what that meant was when she was giving birth to, she did not have a bone in her right leg. Tibia was missing, and she also didn't have a kneecap. And so after giving birth to Beulah, we were told, like 2-3 days afterwards, that we needed to amputate the limb. And so for us, that meant having your first child and she's handicapped. And really, we were not going to make that decision. We thought that, you know, there would probably be a better option. So we went from place to place and kept doing researches until finally we decided to do the amputation for her. And so we amputated the leg, and she uses a prosthetic limb.
Well, you know, in Africa, disability is still regarded somewhat as spiritual, as a curse. Yes. When the doctor told you that you had to amputate your first daughter, I mean, it's about a decade now, but when you first heard that, what came to mind? What were you going through?
The first thing is, it's not my portion.
Okay.
Like, this is not going to happen to me. It wasn't helped by the situation that, you know, a lot of people were giving different suggestions and trying to put us in a box on what went wrong, what we didn't do right, what we could have. Probably you didn't take your medication. Probably you offended God. Maybe this is a curse. And there were a lot of things coming up at the same time. And really, for me, I didn't just want to hear that story. I was in denial for a long period of time. So yes, the societal stigmatization is there, but also the cultural and the religious beliefs that it's not something that should happen to you normally. So
I just want you to regale us with the emotional interplay of having your first child amputated, leading up to the surgery and afterwards, and coming to terms, because one other part of society is we don't come to terms with those things in times, and little wonder people are living with things like post-traumatic stress disorder. Coming to terms with the fact that your daughter, Beulah, would work with a prosthetic limb. I mean, what was that process like for you? And because that's also indicative for a lot of parents out there watching us, that they have told that their child might have to go through an amputation. The acceptance and the makeup.
Initially, I didn't even think of a prosthetic limb. It wasn't an option. I didn't see that. The only thing I saw was inability. She probably will not be able to go to school. A lot of people that I see on the streets begging without a leg. And I was just wondering how she would be able to live her life to the fullest. I cried every day. And so I know that today it looks like it's so easy, but I cried every day. I was in pain. I was in despair. I felt like God had forsaken me. I felt like my life wasn't going to be complete any longer, and I would cry every day. And I did this crying for almost a year. I was in denial. I totally wouldn't listen to anybody that had anything to say about it, even though I was doing research, even though, and I mean, we went to every religious house that could be suggested. Some people even suggested that we should go to the herbalist. It was an option at that time. And I would sit back and ask myself what I have done wrong and why this should happen to me. And I think a time came when my husband actually told me that he was convinced of the fact that, God was going to take care of her. And so we defined God taking care of her being that she wouldn't have to go through amputation. We just wake up one day and you just, open your eyes and
she'll have a leg.
She'll have a leg. And, but after he said it, we were open to more options of researching and actually checking what was happening, globally with respect to amputation and how it was going to affect her and even affect us as individuals. I know it's something that is very painful. I know it's a thing of despair, and people going through it could actually go through depression as a result of that. So as a parent, you having to deal with a child with disability.
You went through some form of depression?
Pretty much, I had a lot of support systems. So I wouldn't say, or probably I never really sat back to think about it, say, this stage, but I cried every day. I mean, I would just see other children walking and I start crying.
So let's talk about her. I mean, this is your own experience and your feelings.
Yeah.
It's a decade now, because I read the story. That was 2009?
Yes.
Okay, so she's about 10 years old now.
She's going to be 10.
Okay, great. So let's talk about her. Does she ever feel that, without this, she's not complete? How does she feel?
Sometimes she feels bad because she's now a preteen, and she knows a lot about amputation, and she sometimes will feel sad because she's stigmatized against. People sometimes try to bully her. However, because she has a lot of information and she's come to accept herself, so we worked her through a process of having to accept the situation and knowing that even though she can't run as fast as other people, she definitely can run, and people go at different paces and all of that. She's able to deal with it. But like every other child, she has her emotions and mood swings and times when she's very happy. But she's learned also to focus on her abilities, the things she can do versus the things she cannot do. So she swims, for instance, and for her, that's like a place, like a safe place, and she gets there, and she can ride the bicycle even though she doesn't have one leg. So pretty much focusing on her abilities.
Another thing that comes to mind is finding the right prosthetic limb, because that's a big challenge. And when you look at the stats about the waiting list for prosthetic limb in this country, it is very, very high and almost unimaginable. And that question will also segue into what you do now with your foundation, where you pretty much help people find the right prosthetic limb and give them their limbs back. What was it like, the process of finding the right prosthetic limb? Because not just any prosthetic limb will work. It has to be the right fit. What's that process like?
So initially when we did the amputation, we just got to the hospital to get her a limb, and we got her something that is called a chapeau foot. A chapeau foot basically is like the base of where prosthetic starts. It's heavy. It wasn't the perfect fit for her. She couldn't use it for long, and so we had to do a bit of research on what she could use. And so we've transited from using just a chapeau foot to now using modular prostheses and even getting to the very mechanical ones. Because it's very expensive, a lot of people will try to settle for something that is like a chapeau foot, and it's heavy, it doesn't serve them, it probably will cause backache at the end of the day. And it's taken us almost 9 years to get to this point, and even as a foundation, having to see how to quickly transit to see what people can use. She currently uses something that is a bit mechanized, so she has an hydraulic foot and an hydraulic knee, and that helps her to do a lot more activities. So she can run easily with it, she can jump, she can ride her bicycle without any issue. But it definitely has been a long journey getting to this space.
And he talked about your foundation. We can only imagine that your personal experience, made you, you decided that this was a purpose for you, and so you founded the Irede Foundation. But I was curious because when I was going through Irede Foundation, I see that you do just from age 0 to 18. Any particular reason why you do that?
Pretty much, getting a prosthesis, even though it's expensive, as a child you will keep changing. And then we recognized after a while that the problem with a lot of parents is when you think of the cost of having to change a limb. So Beulah...
Like how much is a prosthetic limb?
It's about 1.2 million, 1.5 million.
And you have to change that
and
how many times?
And you have to keep changing My daughter has used 12 prostheses, so she's on the 12th one right now.
So that's over 12 million naira
Yeah.
in the space of 9 years on prostheses alone.
Exactly, and she's
And
still
this
going
is
to continue
minus
using.
the carving and the actual process of getting it in.
Yeah, so we bring in the materials from outside the country, then it's customized for the child, then you have to learn to walk after that, because for every time you change your limb and there's something that is different about the limb, then you need to learn to use it again. It's like fitting a new dress. So it's the problem that a lot of parents have to go through. And then I chose children because, you know, they're so adorable, and because they will learn the process and it becomes a part of their lives. And I believe with that, you'll be able to also shape and empower them, get them to the point where they're able to live their life in spite of their amputation. So their focus will no longer be on their disability, but their abilities, the things they can do. And also, we've been able to educate other children following this model, because then the kids just see that they are regular, like they are, and that, yes, they use an artificial limb, but there's nothing wrong with them. So you're able to reduce societal stigmatization. They, in turn, go and educate their parents, get them aware, and that's where we get the awareness going.
But what is the statistics of Nigerian child amputee, and what is usually responsible for this? I mean, we know polio. Your daughter's incident as well is different. But because you interact with them a lot, what is the most cause for amputation in Nigeria?
Trauma. Over 85% of the kids that come to the foundation today are as a result of trauma. So a bike knocks a child down, Marwa hits someone.
That's the tricycle.
Yeah. And as a result of that, and when this happens, people don't go to the hospital, they go to the traditional bone setters. And by the time they're getting to the traditional bone setters, before they get to the hospital, it's too late. And the decision will be to amputate because the leg has probably gone bad or the arm has gone bad, and then that leads to amputation. So it's basically trauma. And I will say, trauma linked with ignorance and, having to take the wrong decisions, because if at the time you had the accident, you probably went to the hospital, you see that it's just probably a minor fracture, you can put a cast on it and the leg will heal probably after 6-7 weeks. However, by the time you get to take that decision of going to the bone setter, then probably will lead to amputation at the end of the day.
I just want to talk a little bit about stigmatization, because there are a lot of people out there watching us that might be going through this. They've lost a limb and they're stigmatized. And it looks as though in this country, the Disability Act is not working. We all know the ding-dong that heralded the Disability Act. At some point, he said it was passed, and the other time he said it was not passed. And the National Assembly kept on going back and forth. And when I even saw the Disability Act, the spirit behind it said there was just a fine of 100,000 naira or 6 months imprisonment for anybody that stigmatizes. And the fact that buildings are just given a 5-year moratorium to remold the way the buildings look. And the structure in general. And when I look at the law in detail, it's quite very lax, very open, both the spirit and the content of the law. And you have faced this stigmatization. So if, with all the stigmatization you have faced, will somebody giving you 100,000 naira as fine be able to take away the pain?
Will it take away the pain, Rufai? No, it won't take away the pain. But I would like to look at the bill in terms of we now even having a bill.
Okay.
Because it's crazy. It's taken all these years for us to get to this space.
Over 18 years.
And now we have the bill. What is happening to implementation? No one is implementing. No one cares really about it. And for me, that is a place I would like us to focus, where we start getting that bill implemented, where first we make Nigerians aware of this bill, and even the not so fine that is there, because 100,000 is really cannot equate what I have gone through, or for every time I've been stigmatized, or for every time someone has said something to affect my child, or even not. I mean, take for instance, I get to the airport and she needs a wheelchair, and someone is asking me, she's a child, why does she need a wheelchair? I'm literally saying, she doesn't have a leg, she needs it. And he said, you can carry her now.
You do that to you in the airport?
Yeah, you can carry her. She's a child, you carry her. Because somewhere in our minds, the people that need wheelchairs are probably older people, or people that literally are incapacitated, they shouldn't be children. And so we believe that those people should not be children, probably adults, probably the aged. And so for me, it's getting us to the point where we start a conversation around that bill to ensure that we begin to become aware as people, as citizens, because when you get outside of the country, where disability is taken very seriously, you see that people are aware. People today, they probably won't take someone on a job because the person has a disability. And so I just interacted with a guy last week in Ghana, and he told me he was fired from his job, not because he was incompetent, but the white lady that he was reporting to left the company, and so they felt, you know what, we are done with you. So for me,
so his advocate had gone,
yes,
had left the company.
Had left the company, and so they took away his job. He's very competent. The guy is awesome. So for me, it's getting us to the point where we start talking about this and creating a lot of awareness, and we see that disability is the thing. For me, I'm like, it's the sexy thing, and so we should get on the bandwagon and do it, because it's the right thing to do, and start implementing that bill so we can then start looking at how that bill can become reformed.
So how do we prioritize this? Because there's a lot of aspects. There's the government, there's the people, there's a corporate organization, there's even the family, because some families are said to be the ones to stigmatize the victims themselves first and foremost. So how do we prioritize this? Who should lead this conversation, the implementation? The media also has a role to play. In your own opinion, how do we prioritize this? Who should take the lead here?
I won't say that the government should, because I think the government has passed the bill, but every stakeholder has something to do. The government needs to enforce implementation, ensure that the corporate society, they are doing the things that they need to do. So they have 5 years to work on their buildings and ensure accessibility and all of that, then make sure that they do it. I think that the civil society, which is where Irede Foundation plays, basically needs to start a conversation around this and get to do something and create awareness. So all the stakeholders, the religious bodies, because again, one of the things that happen when people have children with disabilities, culturally, there are still some cultures where they say, oh, this child has a disability, this is misfortune, you should kill the child. So start seeing how
does that happen in Nigeria?
Oh, yes, it does. And how we can start influencing. So going to the schools, there are schools that will not take children, that will refuse them a right of getting an education because they have one form of disability or the other. Sometimes I sit back and say, oh, probably it's because it's some form of disability that has to do with their intellect. But no, I've seen people refuse children that are amputated because they don't have a limb. So I'll say all the stakeholders need to get on it, and we all need to lead it in our separate ways. So for me, as a mother, now that I have the awareness, there's something I can do and educate my family, the children. So I won't put Beulah at home and say she will not go out because she has a disability. So that's the part that I have to play. I will not stop her from getting an education because she has a disability. And so I think all the stakeholders need to get on board for this conversation to really become rich.
Recently, out on a limb day, and because you have this yearly walk you normally do, I saw pictures of the governor-elect of Lagos State, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, there with out on a limb. Have you gotten time to talk to the governor-elect about these things, and what are the consultations? Because that was a big boost. That was the first time that the governor-elect and the incoming governor was there at a walk for people that had that their limbs were amputated. So how are you engaging with him? Now you have the ears of the governor. He knows that there's alternate limb. He's been part of the walk. He's endorsed it. He's worn the shirt. So will that translate to in the next 1 or 2 years that the Disability Act in Lagos will be enforced, that buildings will be shut down if they don't have access road for people living in some form of disability? What did you talk to him on the sidelines of this?
Interestingly, Lagos State is one state that has, even before the national bill was passed, Lagos State had a bill and tried to do something about persons with disabilities. So, the BRT buses, some of them, had access. And if you have a disability, for you to get into the bus, you could get it for free and all of that. So Lagos State started that conversation long before the national body started the conversation. And with the governor-elect, he has a thing for disability. We've started some conversations. It's not been solidified. There are also other organizations that work with amputees. So we have Amputees United, and the conversation has started. Have we really gotten into the place where, you know, we start getting to get the framework or the strategy on how to go about it? No. But the conversation definitely has started.
Well, one of the complexities, all the complexity of disability is that it is associated with poverty. And we've talked about the affordability and accessibility of prosthetics. It is really expensive.
It is.
And you are helping children get limbs, and these limbs, they have to change. How are you funding that, and what more can be done?
Today, we have 60% of the funds that we get from individuals. So we do a lot of campaigns, such as Out on a Limb, to see how we can raise funds. All we do, basically, is we say that the fact that you did not have a limb, no child should stay without a limb for no reason. Poverty is not a good enough reason. Not knowing is not a good enough reason. Nothing should stop a child from having a limb. And so for us, that's why we fundraise. And so we have 60% of our funds coming from individuals. We have support also from Nivea today, from Shell, as the corporate bodies that support us to do what we do. We also have a lot of in-kind, and I was sitting back as I was coming here and thinking a lot of in-kind work that happens, you know, behind the scene, photography, from Photolight, ensuring that these things come to us and they come for free to ensure that we're able to project what we do. So do we have enough yet? No, because I believe that we can have a lot. Just imagine a child like a 2-year-old having to get a limb. This child will need to get a limb till the child is 18. You need roughly about $65,000 to fund that child's limb till the child is 18. Imagining that that child does not grow very tall. It's probably someone like me doesn't have a tall frame. But when you begin to grow taller and fatter, then it can even reach about $100,000 to support that child till the child is 18. So today, these are the companies we work with. These are the people that support the work we do. And of course, I would say Arise is supporting us with the work we do because you're putting it out there. I don't know who is going to hear this and will decide, I want to support the work that you do. So that's basically how we get the funding for the work that we do.
Let me just take you on this, and let's go back to Biola. The future. You know, it will get to a time Beulah is still under your care. She'll leave the house. She'll get settled down at home. She'll get married, you know. What's the mental frame on how she's going to handle all of this in her later life?
I'll say the future
How are you preparing her for that?
The future is actually here now. Because we started when she was 2. Basically, we do a lot of talking, trying to build her mental being and seeing and focusing on her abilities. So I remember the first day she said, I want to ride a bicycle. I first sank in my chair and I was like, bicycle? Why are you? Just stay in your space. Like, you know. But I'm like, let's give it a shot. But before we go on those kind of journeys, I remind her that, see, people are in different phases. And the best analogy, I think, was used by Zubi. Zubi is my husband, and was when Beulah fell down. And she ran and said, I fell down because of my leg. And so we reminded her, your brother also falls down. Why does he fall down? And she said, he just falls down. I said, exactly. So everybody falls down in life. So it's not a function of whether because you're big or you're small. Anyone can trip and fall. So it's spending a lot of time with her to build her emotional strength on all of those funds, making her try everything she wants to try, and also showing her our own vulnerable parts. When we fail, we let her know we failed. So she realizes that it's not because you have a disability, that's why you fail. In life, people fail. And so showing her all of that part, I believe, is preparing her for the future. And I said the future is now because we're at a particular stage now where basically she's a preteen, she's getting advances from boys, she's having to go to parties, you know, and she's really just transiting. And she's saying, and I think that's what life is going to also bring, and not shielding her. I mean, she goes to a school where there are a lot of people, and so she has to interact with all of these people. We're hoping that she goes to the boarding house, that she goes to the boarding house. We believe that will also prepare her more for what life has to show. But I think it's the same thing that you have to do with every child. Just prepare them for the future, nothing special, but helping her try everything she wants to try. She wants to be a model. And so for every opportunity we have for her to showcase that, we try to help her.
That's fantastic.
To come into that space.
That's great. At this age that, you engage them at the Radio Foundation, I mean, 0 to 18, I'm sure you get a lot of the younger ones first. Very impressionable age. Just recently, there was a video that went viral of a refugee boy from Syria who got a prosthetics. Yes, and he had that move. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it went viral. A lot was said about that video, how he was handling his situation. But let me ask you about the Nigerian child. When they get these legs, are they receptive of this? Are they receptive? Are they
excited?
Of it? Really?
I mean,
how do you explain to them that this is a new leg?
You just saw me dancing. And I mean, a lot of process goes into it. Even before we give the child the prosthesis, we try to psychologically get them ready for the process. So start talking to them about it. And there are two types of children. There are the ones that have probably walked before, and a traumatic experience happened and led to amputation. And there are some that have never walked before. They've never experienced what it means to have a limb. So, but for these two types of kids, we go through a process of getting them ready for their limb. And honestly, the thing that wakes me up in the morning is the smiles on their faces, is the expectation. I've seen kids, I mean, after you get your limb, you're supposed to learn to walk. But I've seen children just get the limb and run with it and just try.
Like that.
Yeah, they just want to walk. And that makes me want to do more because it's liberating. I've also worked with some teenagers who've had limbs before, and then all of a sudden, they have something that helps them not to feel different from their friends. I spoke with a guy recently, and his was a very traumatic experience because he was in a tricycle and there was an accident and he lost his limb. And so I was asking him, so what does this do for you? Why are you so particular about the limb? And he said, you know what, this makes me just walk around with my friends. Some of them don't even know that I have an artificial limb, and I'm not different from them. So this is good for me.
This means a lot to him.
It means his life to him.
Let's talk about the technicalities into this. I know every year you set a target. I know thus far you've given certain XYZ number of limbs.
Yeah.
How many have you done thus far?
115.
115.
115, and we've worked with 82 children.
82 children, and every year you set a target, you want to achieve X, Y, Z. How's that been? What's the target for this year?
50.
50, you want to give 50
I want to
limbs?
give 50 limbs.
How many have you given out so far?
We've done about 4. What we also try to do is we don't work with kids when they're in school. We do bulk limbs when they're on holiday because also we don't want to separate them from school. So we try to ensure that we do it while they're on holiday. So we do a lot of clusters. So, I mean, come June, July, we're going to be doing a lot of limbs. Our target is 50 this year. I believe we can achieve it. Last year we did 33.
Okay. What was the target last year?
Last year we wanted to do 60, but we did 33. And for me, that was significant because I didn't think it was possible, really, because we started with just 2 limbs, and we did 2 limbs in 1 year, then we did 10 limbs, then we did 16 limbs, then we did 21 limbs, and, like that. For me, the process starts from when you even identify the child. And so a lot of people sometimes ask, how can we, I don't have money, but I want to be a part of what you're doing. You have children in your neighborhood that need limbs, and you see them every day. All you need to do is refer them to the foundation. And that's a huge part of what we do. So we get referrals from Kaduna, from Ibadan, and people just send a random message, oh, I just walked past this child, or I've been seeing this child. So that's where the process really starts. And then when we take on the kids, we do like a background check to be sure that the parents can't afford the limb, what really happened, how can it be avoided? Because again, that helps us do our research and helps us get to the point where we're currently working on a program of awareness to ensure that if people are even educated, it won't lead to the point where you have to amputate.
Exactly.
And then we take on the child and we do what we call a cast. And a cast is basically you try to get the exact model of what that limb will. And we start the process. That takes about 13 weeks before we finally give the child the limb and then do a process of learning to walk, which is probably another physio for another 10 days, and then the child is good to go.
Let's talk about even the viability of this limb, because you said it's imported normally. What's the future like? Is there a possibility we can start to cast those limbs here? What are the limbs? What materials are they made of? Are they materials we can source here? Because if you say one costs about 50,000 US, and we are taking that foreign exchange out of the country, how about we bring that foreign exchange here, manufacture the limbs here, set up an industry that does that here, put the money in this economy, because that would also go a long way to create jobs for people.
And probably be cheaper for the parents.
And cheaper for the parents.
Oh,
so what's the possibility of that? And are we thinking in that light? And is this something you might be engaging the governor-elect of Lagos State? Probably if it's in the works, you never know.
I mean, there are two technicians that I currently know that are working on sourcing materials locally, especially for upper limb amputation. Actually, at the foundation also, we've given an upper limb that was made, like 100% of what was used was made locally, from the leather to everything was gotten locally. So yes, we're working in the firms of trying to get something that will serve us as a country. Currently, we run a mini lab. I would say we have a prosthetic lab, and about 50% of what we use is locally sourced. And then the balance 50% is then brought in. So there's a lot of works. There's a whole lot of economy around disability.
Around it, yeah.
So from the anatomy to the material. So you have leather, and we have a bit of leather, so that can be used. The things that currently we import today are the joints. Okay. So you have like the knee joints, the elbow joints, the shoulder, all of that are the things that we still bring in, and of course the foot or the feet. But the rest of the things are currently being locally manufactured. We've done a bit of tests and pilots on some of the children we're working with, and the guys are still working, trying to get the best.
And so there's a possibility in the nearest future. So like a 10, 20-year time
maybe like a 10, 20
and,
years. Maybe like 10, 20 years. I actually have someone that has done something that is about 70% local manufacturing here in Nigeria.
Okay. Prevention is said to be better, but even more cheaper than cure. And you talked about having conversations to even prevent this. But what sorts of conversations are you having, and with who? I mean, you've also highlighted here that most of the cases you see are from trauma, accidents,
85
tricycles.
Right.
We do have a lot of those on our roads. Who are you having these conversations with?
Today, we're going to schools.
Okay.
We're doing a lot of media work and talking about how to prevent. And so when this happens, what you need to do. So that's the stage where we are today, because the access we have is mostly in schools, and also the media, and of course social media. So you just literally just talk, and probably someone gets to hear it and then does something about it. We've not started full engagement with the government. Like I said, we started talking with the governor-elect on some of the things that we think and what we think we should do as a people. But I think that's where the conversation starter is and what we should do.
You must have developed a very thick skin when it comes to the issue of stigma, knowing that we don't have laws implemented, to fight for these children. How do you do it? When someone stigmatizes against it, she was actually checking out if her skin was thick. When someone stigmatizes your child or discriminates, what do you do? What have you done so far? Do you threaten them? Do you call the police? What exactly do you do?
I've come to the point where I've come to realize that most times it's as a result of ignorance and not knowing.
So you just let it go?
No, I don't let it go.
Okay.
I have conversations.
Okay.
So sometimes I educate. And sometimes I face it. So like my daughter had a situation in school where she was told she could not swim once. And I told the guy, you can't tell her what she can and cannot do.
Okay.
And I remember we had to take her out of that school. Because I told him, I said, you can't.
Just because of that?
Yeah. Because for me, and if consistently I've talked about something and I can't see it change, I say that you're not ready to change. And because I can't change the decision you make, I can change the one. I took her to that school so I can determine whether she leaves the school, especially because I've had conversations consistently about it. And for me, it's letting people know at every point. So at every point I interact with you, I let you know about disability. I find a way to have the conversation. First, I want to understand what it is you know about disability, what are your thoughts about it, and why are you thinking the way you are, and kind of trying to tell you about what I think about it and what it should be. So it's finding the time to educate people at every point. They just had something in her school 2 days ago, and where International Families Day, and she was asking me, and parents came to school to talk about stuff. So she was asking me, why didn't you just talk about discrimination? You know, people are discriminating. But you know, someone else came and talked about discrimination. I was like, thank you for talking about discrimination. So it's finding every opportunity to talk about it.
Let's talk a little bit about the family. You know, because in a home where the big sister has got, you know, this level of disability, the interaction, and like you said, you have other children amongst our brothers is another factor. The psychological interaction. And no matter how you do it as a parent, there's always that shortfall. She'll always say, oh, mommy, how do you manage that?
Okay, we talk about it. Ambila does everything in the house. She sweeps, she washes her plates. She climbs the stairs. She rides a bicycle. So we try to do everything. Everything. When I mean everything, we make her do everything. And her brother has come to know and learn that and realize that his sister has a disability. And so we found a way to integrate and ensure that she does everything. So she's sweeping the floor, you're sweeping the floor.
Okay.
She's cooking.
So there's no exclusion.
There's no exclusion so she's included in everything. And so he cannot even say, oh, you're preferring her because she has no limb. So literally, I mean, I've watched both of them play around, and he sometimes will hold, and I tell her that's exactly what you're going to face in the outside world.
And sometimes will hold a prosthetic.
Yes, and make her hop around, and then he runs, and she's hopping after him.
Brothers.
Yeah.
So don't be like that. Don't be like that.
And so, but I think that's what the outside world will do, probably literally or in another way.
Okay, we'll take a quick break. We'll come back because I want to hear the most ridiculous things you've heard about disability when it comes to children. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. Stay tuned. Great to have you back, and we still have with us Crystal. Crystal, we have to quickly wrap up this, but tell me, what's the most ridiculous thing you've heard about someone with disability, an amputee?
Yeah, which?
Wow.
Wow. And they've told you that?
Yeah.
And how did you respond?
It's getting me somewhere.
Okay. Well, how do they contact you, those who want to help? want to be a part of Irede Foundation?
Please follow our social media handles at the Irede Foundation. And Irede is spelled I-R-E-D-E, T-H-E-I-R-E-D-E. Across all those social media platforms, you get to know what we're doing, and I think that will be a huge support for us. And remember to refer a child.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Crystal.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.